Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, which is the latest in our series of called Rhetoric to Reality, which is really addressing all the big policy issues which affect social enterprises and people in Scotland. And the one today is Alliance for Change, and that's about embedding social impact in every type of business. So really kind of, I suppose, getting beyond sectors, getting beyond business models and looking at the phrase I keep using is shared values. So that's kind of our theme today. We have a lineup of 6 speakers today, so who are well briefed to be within time, which will leave us plenty of time for discussion and questions at the end. So we'll have the presentations first, then questions and discussion at the end. It is being recorded today and will be posted on our YouTube channel as well and social media. When you do want to ask questions at the end of the presentations, if you want to come on camera and unmute and ask your question, or you can post a question or a comment in the chat at any time as well. So just feel free as we go through the presentations just to post anything into the chat and we'll pick those up. So I won't delay any longer. We will move to our first speaker, who is Michael Roy from University of Stirling. Michael.
Thanks very much, Duncan. Many of you may have seen this. Well, I haven't done this particular presentation before, but many of you have probably seen me talking at various things before. I'm Professor Michael Roy. I'm Professor of Social Innovation and Sustainable Organisations at the University of Stirling. I'm also from now Associate Dean Research and Innovation there at the Stirling Business School. And I'm here today to talk about, well, first of all, explain who I am, first of all, right? So my areas of research concern social innovation, social enterprise, and other kind of alternative economic forms. I've written extensively on mostly on the health and wellbeing impacts of social enterprises or community-led organisations, on policy ecosystems, on collaborative governance, co-production, particularly involving non-profits in the public sector. In 2022, I was elected as chair of DTAS, the Development Trust Association. So that's the national body, for those who don't know, national membership body for organisations focused on place-based, community-led social economic development. I regularly advise international governments, so I was involved in the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, a subgroup on inclusive and democratic business models, which I'm going to focus on today. And I'm now involved in the new working group on economic democracy that's been established. So the NSET, the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, said they wanted to undertake and publish a review of how best to significantly increase the number of social enterprises, employee-owned businesses and cooperatives in Scotland, supporting regional generation and the wealth of local communities. I actually took issue with the minister on this particular focus because I don't think necessarily we want just by increasing the number of things is going to actually make any difference. And in actual fact, usually cooperatives, social enterprises, etc., usually emerge as a result of trying to focus on issues of social dislocation, social issues, etc., to try and address them. You find, for example, in Scandinavian countries, they don't have so many social enterprises in particular. So all I'll say is be careful what you wish for. But we can focus on that later on. So IDBMs wasn't my idea, so please don't blame me for the new acronym that's crept in, which you may or may not be aware of. But this is the acronym that's being used in this particular report. It's a very broad church or umbrella term, I would describe it. It effectively brings together in the same room, and probably for the first time actually, a whole wide range of different of people focused on much the same thing. So employee-owned businesses, social enterprises. So we know that social enterprises is a very broad church itself. So from very democratic social enterprises to not really very democratic at all social enterprises, they're included within this. Co-ops, mutuals, development trusts, some of, but not all, may identify in fact as social enterprises. Community enterprises are businesses which may or may not identify as social enterprises too. But may have decided to hold on to a legacy term from many years back for whatever reason they want to. They can do what they like. And the link to the report to government, which was published in September 24, can be found there. Probably going to share my slides, and I'm happy for Duncan to share them with anyone who wants them. And whoever gets the slides gets a free hyperlink to the report, but I'm sure you could Google it and find it yourself. Okay, now there was 17 recommendations arising from this IDBM report. And I'm going to run through the 17 recommendations because I think it's important to highlight what they are, okay? So we say that IDBM should run through Scottish economic thinking, strategy, economic development, strategy in particular, as a central golden thread. In other words, it's not something which is a sideline or marginal to the mainstream economy. It is in fact part of and a vital part of the economy. Okay. Second one is to establish an economic democracy group, and I'll explain a wee bit about that in a second. We need to invest in data and evidence on IDBMs to support policy and service design. We need to know how many there are, what we're talking about, the scale, the impact they're having, etc., etc. We need to have a national awareness raising and training program, not just for social enterprises, but on wider IDBMs. Widen the scope of existing business awards, which I think we've already done in terms of including IDBMs. Ensure that outreach, awareness raising, and pre-technical IDBM development. I wish I would stop saying IDBM. It sounds like an intercontinental ballistic missile or something from the Cold War, but it's certainly not. It's yeah, okay. Further and higher education organisations should take a key role. In anchor organisations should take a key role in promoting IDBMs. We should have, as part of the Economic Democracy Group, we should develop a clear plan to create an effective and extensive ecosystem, possibly in the form of a centre for excellence, providing support. The next lot are streamlining existing public resources. I think what we meant by that was that we see this fair amount of overlap and probably a fair amount of gaps as well. So we want to make sure that the support is as streamlined and as controlled and as organised as well as possible. Map the current provision and identify gaps in support. Grow the role of SNIB and potentially and specifically support IDBMs. We need to get the Scottish National Investment Bank working in this particular area. Consider extending the role of social investment democratic finance providers, for example, Social Investment Scotland, Scottish Community Finance, etc., to cover all enterprises operating with an IDBM model or an IDB model. Promote IDBMs and economic democracy within economic development with grant givers, procurement, commissioning professionals from the public, private, and third sector. Amend the sustainable procurement duty to facilitate the promotion of participation of IDBMs. Lots and lots of you over many years have been involved in this sector. Continue to pull your hair out around how hard it is to get work from the public sector in particular. So I think it would make sense to extend that particular provision. Consider extending the Scottish right to buy legislation. That's right to buy for companies, particular companies that are going out of business, etc. This relates to a kind of Scottish Marcora law, which I can go into in detail if anyone's interested. Explicitly weave the contribution and value of IDBMs into relevant economic indicators. UK and Scottish Government to explore potential tax relief, etc. Now, the Scottish Government hasn't actually published a response to the report, nor indeed the recommendations. However, they have convened an economic democracy group. So my last slide on this is basically to say, what on earth do we mean when we talk about economic democracy? So really what it is, this is recognising that we've had 4 decades of deregulation, financialisation, economic crisis, continual austerity, but it's meant a loss of economic control and security within individuals, communities, etc., etc. So this particular solution is about supporting people to take back control of their economic lives. So there is obviously, with the cooperative tradition, concern with workplace rights, collective bargaining, and indeed the trade union tradition. Modern conceptualizations also think about it as a shift in focus to consider consideration of individual economic rights, for example, ownership rights, and processes of public engagement and deliberation, including beyond the workplace. So that's what they've signed up to. So that's where we're going to go with it. So that's all I've got to say in my 6 minutes. I hope I haven't gone over too much, but I have rattled through it quite a fair bit. So I'm happy to answer any questions at all about any of this stuff.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Almost the time, but it's fine. It's all good. So without further ado, we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Louise Scott from Media Co-op and also workers.coop, which is the Federation for Worker Cooperatives. Louise.
Should go into presentation mode. Can you hear me all right? Yeah.
Yep. That seems all good. Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
brilliant. Thanks very much. So my name is Louise Scott. I'm one of the co-founders of a worker co-op in Glasgow called Media Co-op that's still going strong after 20 years. And we won the inaugural Impact Award for Democratic and Inclusive Business. I usually have to write it down because it's quite hard to remember the name of the award, as Michael pointed out. I'm also a member of Cooperate Scotland, which is a cooperative of which is a co-op of co-op development advisors, and I'm on a couple of the working groups in the Worker Co-op Federation. And also mention I've just joined the board of Social Enterprise Scotland. I'm not sure how much folk here today know about co-op, so I'm going to bring a few other cooperators into the room and tell you a bit about it. Bear with me. So this is a 2-minute video, a sneak preview of a film that Co-ops UK will launch soon. So let's try and wait a minute, and it's run on a bit. Just a sec. Okay.
I'm happier here than anywhere I've worked.
Where I shop, I can make a difference in things that I care about.
Where I live, I get a say on what my housing is like.
In my football club, I get say on ticket prices, so football is affordable for all. Because my club is a co-op, owned and run by the family. We set the prices.
Our co-op is owned by us, the members.
Our housing is run by us, the tenants.
The workers own this business.
Cooperatives are owned and controlled by their members, so they're democratic. It's the members who call the shots, not distant shareholders. It's cooperation, and it works. There are over 7,000 cooperatives in the UK, right across the economy. A cooperative can be anything: a factory, a GP practice, housing, a wind farm, a bike shop, a pub, a music venue, a tech business, funeral services, a distillery, a farm, childcare or travel services, and best known, a supermarket. As long as it's owned and controlled by its members. Whether they have 6 members or 6 million, all cooperatives follow the same principles. Their members have a common goal for the cooperative to succeed.
Cooperatives put people and communities first, prioritising long-term benefits over short-term profits.
Cooperatives are ethical, values-driven, and democratic.
Meaning decisions are made by the people who know best and care most.
Cooperatives do business better.
Why? Because we are owned and run by our members.
Cooperatives make decisions for the long term that are in the best interests of its members and the business, not just a small group of shareholders.
And this makes our business resilient and sustainable. And because we own our business, we are motivated to make it succeed.
So when you join a cooperative,
You join a global movement that's building a better world.
Cooperatives owned by our members.
Let me just go back to the slides. Sorry, just a sec. I'm just going to give me a second while it reloads and I can get back onto the present mode.
That's all good.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry. It just it sort
Okay.
of somehow does this thing where it goes to sleep. Very annoying. But it will be back with us soon. You can all watch Miro slowly loading.
We've all been there. It's okay.
Yeah. Why is it not coming up? Coming up. Come on. So it should go on there. No. Okay, well, don't know what, for some reason it's not loading onto the main thing, and I'm aware that we're short of time. So I'll just expand it to fill the space. And let's go along here. So as you'll have seen from the film, the thing that differentiates us as co-ops is the ownership and the democracy. And in the case of workers' co-op, like the one where I work, where we own the business and control it democratically, means we're making decisions on things like pay and conditions, how profits are managed and spent, and so on. So whether it's here in Scotland or in Kenya, Canada, Australia, India, cooperatives are an internationally recognised way of directly addressing poverty and exclusion and raising up communities through business. Now, the theme today is social impact. And then the main point that I want to make is that in cooperatives, social impact comes not only from the work a cooperative does, but from the way that a cooperative is structured. Promoting economic inclusion, long-term well-being over short-term profits, and driving community resilience. And research has demonstrated that in worker cooperatives, that worker co-ops are better at ensuring that work offers a decent livelihood. We've got significantly lower pay ratios and share profits equitably amongst every worker, ensure more democratic workplaces, which in turn offer improved worker well-being, are more resilient as startups, where we're twice as likely to survive than conventional businesses, and that we're better at preserving decent livelihoods in downturns. In an economy where so many people have so little control over their work, thinking of the gig economy, 0 hours contracts, agency work, extractive business models that hit the least well paid the hardest and impoverish communities, this is really important and valuable and directly impactful. I often say that cooperatives, first recorded in Ayrshire in the 18th century, fun fact, are the original social enterprise, but the cooperative difference is ownership and democracy. For co-ops, it's not about a top-down solution or about philanthropy. It's about the direct empowerment of people and communities through their own labour. It's about power sharing, and it's about mutual trust. It's about addressing structural poverty by putting the profits derived from work into the hands of those who've done the work, ensuring profits nurture the workforce and the company, and crucially remain in the community. Co-ops are a tried and tested way for communities and groups to lift themselves out of poverty and into a better quality of life. My final point is that co-ops, as that we are only scraping the surface of what cooperatives could achieve in Scotland, both in terms of the economy and in terms of social impact. Another fun fact, the co-op sector in Scotland is bigger than people think. For example, 30% of Scotland's agricultural output comes from co-ops, with all the profits going back into local farming communities. But also it's not as big or as impactful as it could be. You probably all will know that the current UK government is committed to doubling the size of the cooperative sector. Let's look to Mondragon, a vast network of interconnected cooperatives across many sectors in the Basque Country, or Emilia-Romagna in the north of Italy, where 1/3 of social care is delivered by co-ops. In some regions, entire ecosystems of cooperatives drive the economy, community wealth building, and social impact, and it all starts in individual workplaces. Scotland could be like that. So to sum up, social impact's not only about the work our enterprises do and its effect on the wider community, it's about how our companies are structured, how the profits are used, and who has ownership and control. Co-ops have a proven track record of directly addressing poverty and exclusion for 250 years here in Scotland and right across the world. And if you want to know a little bit more, you can find out lots of good stuff on the Cooperatives UK website, more information on the Worker Co-op Federation website, and you can also find out about co-ops internationally at the International Cooperative Alliance website. And if you want to find out more about Worker Co-op Media Co-op, you can come and find us on that website as well. So thank you very much.
Brilliant, thanks Louise. Thanks for that. Good to see a short film as well. I love a good short film. So I'll hand over to our next speaker, who is Eleonora from Prosper.
Okay. Thanks, Duncan, and it's a pleasure to be part of this conversation. As Duncan knows, business purpose and purpose-led businesses is a big passion of mine. So it's going to be great to hear your question and speak with the other speaker. So I work for a membership organization that is also a think tank, has been around for almost 100 years. And what we are trying to do is to bring people together from all sectors, industries, and places to grow, to shape the economic growth and prosperity for all. Something that I think is very clear to us is that a strong economy cannot really be separated from social and environmental well-being. So we were really delighted when the Scottish Government approached us in 2022 to create a commission that is called the Business Purpose Commission to make a recommendation for how Scotland can become known at home and globally for nurturing purposeful businesses which make a positive impact on economic prosperity, social well-being, and environmental sustainability. So the findings and recommendation were reported in the report. Now is the time for purpose, putting purpose at the heart of Scottish business. And the report really presents or make the business case for purpose and set out practical action that businesses supported by its Scottish and UK government can take. So the report also set a vision that by 2030, all businesses in Scotland will have become purposeful businesses which profit from finding solution for people and the planet. And the report says that purposeful businesses are more resilient, they are more innovative, they have a better relationship with customer because they want to buy from them, and also people want to work for them. So I think there is a real opportunities in Scotland to support more businesses to develop their purpose, and in order and also because a quite recent report from BLAB UK and the Better Business Act campaign just highlighted that a purpose-led economy would bring something like 150 million pound to the UK GDP per year. That equal to a 7% boost to UK GDP. So it's not only good for the business, it's not only good for this society and the environment, but it's also really good for the overall GDP. So there are two things that I think we should focus, but there are more recommendations in our report, and then there will be more opportunities probably to discuss this. But two things we have to do is, first of all, to support businesses to develop their purpose, to understand the purpose, communicate the purpose both internally and externally. And as part of the report, we have also a guide for business, but lately we have been also working with the Productivity Institute to develop another report that is called Business Purpose and Productivity, that look at whether there is a connection between business purpose and productivity, and the good answer is there is. And we are now working to try and develop a purpose-led toolkit for businesses to really help them to understand their purpose, to develop their purpose, and to leverage their purpose. The other thing that is really important, something that is happening at the moment, and one of the things that the Better Business Act campaign suggests is to reform the UK Companies Act and insert a purpose into the heart of the director's duties. So very recently in July, a Liberal Democrat MP called Martin Wrigley sponsored a new bill that is called Company Directors Bill that would amend the section 172 of the Company Act to change the duty of company's director, requiring them to align the needs of shareholders alongside those of employees and the environment in their decision making. The bill had the first read at the House of Commons and is now waiting for the second read. And that is really important, because if that will progress, then all businesses will be required to state their purpose and to satisfy not only the financial, but also the environmental and people reporting. And this is really interesting. So I think what we should really be doing at the moment, businesses in their purpose journey, but also probably trying to create purpose-driven private, public and third sector partnership to share learning. And also something else that we should be doing, and I think this overlaps slightly with the IDBM report recommendation, is that we should make a business purpose a mandatory learning outcome in business education and training. We should also try to produce a tax framework for purposeful business, which incentivizes purpose-led business model, but also trying to create a ESG excellence hub, so fostering a world-class corporate governance and business support ecosystem, which support the mainstream purposeful business. But we also have to make a business purpose a golden thread in Scotland economic strategies. And this will also link to community well-being and all the important other strategies and support to create a more democratic economy and a well-being economy. So that is just some reflection. I know that it was quite fast, but I'm aware I'm cautious of time, so I want to let space for the other speakers.
No, thanks, Eleonora. That's brilliant as well. I'm aware, obviously, we've got 6 speakers today as well, so there's a lot of information for people to digest as well. So I posted a link to the 2 reports that have been mentioned so far into the chat, which people can look at in their leisure time, of course. That's the IDBM report and the original Business Purpose Commission report as well. So do have a read of those, or a scan read at least, of the executive summary at some point. So moving swiftly on, we'll move on to Tim Hartley from Scotland Can Be.
Thanks, Duncan. And hi, everybody. In the interest of making time up, I'm going to boil down what I want to contribute to this conversation to just a couple of sort of hopefully clear points, succinct points, maybe even provocations. My first one is this. I feel really passionately that it's a bit of a misunderstanding to think that businesses somehow need to embed social impact into what they do. And I appreciate that's the name of the thing that brings us together. So bear with me for a moment. The work that I do at Scotland Can Be, and I'll tell the story in a moment about where we've come from, but it really recognizes that all businesses already have enormous social impact. That impact might not be positive. That impact might be controversial, or it might be absolutely incredible and really inspiring. And the issue becomes then, how do we actually identify this? How do we become aware of what the impact is of our businesses? And you've heard so many things mentioned already by our speakers today. Eleonora just there talking about purpose in business. And the truth is, from our perspective, because we've been at this for some time now, is that businesses seem to provide the most extraordinary opportunity for creating meaning, for creating education, for creating belonging, for creating aspiration. And there are so many stories, and Rob, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you in a moment because I know what Jerba stand for as an organization. But somehow that story is getting lost, or rather, we don't know how to tell that story, or we haven't quite got the language, or maybe it doesn't quite fit into a hard-nosed kind of, yeah, but where does the money come from type mentality. And that's all completely understandable. But there is absolutely no sense from where we're sitting that we need to embed social impact into businesses. In fact, it's already there. The challenge is on us to try and bring that data through, bring those stories through in a coherent way. And that's actually all I want to leave everybody with today, is this idea of what do we mean when we say embedding social impact, and how clued in are we to being able to actually identify what we mean by these things. Excuse me. And just very quickly, in case you're wondering, well, who's this guy? So Scotland Can Be, the B in our name is a nod towards the B Corp community. And again, you've just heard Eleonora mention B Lab. So Scotland Can Be comes from one of the co-founders of the B Lab movement, a chap called Bart Houlihan, who 10 years ago, actually, we've been around for ages. He came to Scotland, he was invited to Scotland. And at the time, senior civil servants were asking the question, how can Scotland really embrace this heritage, this identity that Scotland already seems to have about doing business in a creative way, in an inclusive way, in a way that's mindful of communities? And Bart Houlihan's challenge was, how about you think about how to encourage businesses in Scotland to do businesses like B Corps do businesses? He wasn't saying, get everybody to certify to become a certified B Corp. And please let me know if anybody wants to know more about the B Corp movement. Maybe you've heard of it already. But rather, Bart was saying, what can we learn from the B Corp community? And that gave rise to an initiative which today takes the form of Scotland Can Be. But before then, our mandate was to help organizations across the country measure what matters. So that was the strapline, that was our remit, was to help organizations measure what matters. And that, of course, leaves a really interesting question, which is, well, what matters? What matters then? What should matter? What should we be measuring? So on that, I will stop. I don't know where I am on the timer, but that's all I wanted to say, and I'll pass on.
No, that's all good, all good. Under time there, very, very good actually. No, I think that's a good point as well. It's about having this debate, I think, as well. The debate is quite important as well, and really having these different perspectives as well. So that's all good. So move on to our next speaker, who is Rob Henderson from Jerba Campervans, which is an employee-owned business rather. Rob.
Employee business indeed.
Yeah.
Hello, how are you getting on? Thank you for your time. So I'm Rob, as introduced. I'm from Jerba Campervans. So come from slightly more humble beginnings. I started at Jerba about 5 years ago as an auto electrician, and I've kind of worked my way up the business from being on the trust board here to being involved with management of the business. So as Tim said, I think I'm quite nicely suited to tell you a little bit what it's like working in a business, as well as Jerba's story. So we'll convert a van from an empty panel van to a fully converted camper van. And the business was founded in 2006 and we went fully employee owned in 2018. So we operate under what's called the employee ownership trust model, which is effectively a group of people sit in a trust. Nobody in the business directly owns shares, but this trust owns 100% of the shares and they protect the shares for the interested employees. So very similar to the cooperative models that we've spoken about, except the process is it's not less democratic, but the business is more run as a traditional business. So we have, directors of the business and they run the business in the best interest, but the employees that sit on the trust board can hold them to account to say, are you doing what's right for the employees? So very similar to what Tim was saying there, I do believe, embedding social impact in every business is important. But as Tim says, it's finding out what impact that is and which businesses already have impact and, giving them the tools to utilize that impact. So, B Corps is obviously a great movement, something that we're looking at in the future. But for us, B Corps is probably more of a box ticking exercise. The things that Jerba do on a regular basis, built into kind of our core manifesto, what we want to do is help the community and help the employees and pay a fair wage. So I think it's very interesting to look at, do we need B Corps to make us do that? Or is it more just a tick to say that's what we're doing? So, I think a good example of employees in an area over profit, we run a 4-day week here at Jerba. I've done for about kind of a year and a half, 2 years now. And when we sat down with the trust board to make that decision, the conversation was had, we'll probably make less profit. So we sat around that table and we said, yeah, we are more productive as an employee-owned firm, but we still can't manufacture as many vehicles when we reduce the amount of days that we work. We sat around the table and we said, yeah, but that's okay because we'll keep the same wages, we'll pay employees very fairly, and people can have a better work-life balance, which in turn, as you all know, will help money return to the local area from salaries from employees spending more of their time in the local area and spending money. Something we found as employee-owned businesses, our productivity is higher than the average business. And as Louise said, similar to the co-op, we have similar benefits in terms of the resilience that the business has, the adaptability, and just generally the happiness of every employee. So we'll pay well over a living wage here. Our gap from top to bottom is fairly low, and we pay a flat rate bonus most years. So from director to apprentice, we receive the same tax-free bonus up to 3,600. So, that's Jerba's story. I think it works well as an employee-owned firm. It's a growth which is growing. We obviously don't have the history that the cooperatives have. We're comparatively quite young, going back to the Nuttall review and that kind of stuff. There has been some publicity recently with some changes in employee ownership, but I think the really important things is to employee ownership, you see a business impact. So there's a difference in the way the business operates, similar to a cooperative. But there's also a difference in the wider economy and the social impacts of having employee-owned businesses. Because as Tim says, we're already predisposed to do well for the community and the environment. Jerba works net zero, we use solar panels, stuff like that. It's kind of naturally driven without the need of outside government, resource or input. You look at companies like the cooperatives and the employee ownerships, they're doing what the larger companies need to do already without being forced it. And that's my piece. I think that's probably about on time, so I'll finish up on that. Thank you very much for your time.
No, all good, all good. We caught up on time there, I think, quite well. So Louisa McDonnell from Business in the Community Scotland unfortunately couldn't make it today, but luckily her colleague Sue Husband has stepped in to take her place, which is really good. So thank you, Sue, and over to you.
Great, thank you. So my role at Business in the Community is the Impact Director for communities, and I help businesses to show up in the communities where they operate, where their staff live, and where their customers are. For those who don't know about Business in the Community, we're a charity. We're the UK's largest and most influential responsible business network, and we're dedicated to creating a fairer and greener world through those businesses that we work with, and we work with thousands of business leaders to do that. Our network represents more than 20% of the UK workforce, so we know there's a huge opportunity that if we can keep making improvements with those employers, the impact that can have on wider businesses as well. And over the last few years, our work and that of the businesses we work with has actually benefited around 10 million people. We predominantly work with large businesses, so really interesting conversation to listen to today, because the businesses we work with tend to have shareholders and stakeholders, and of course can be driven by profit and growth first and foremost, but the ones that we work with have chosen to take steps to be more responsible, so have purpose built into the way that they operate too. And of course we have co-ops, housing associations, and all sorts of organisations that actually work with us. The work that we do is about supporting businesses to be more responsible. That's more responsible as employers, more responsible to the environment, and responsible to the communities that they serve. And our approach is quite simple, that if they work together, they can do more. So we've been doing this for about 40 years and lots of experience of bringing businesses, the public sector and the voluntary sector together to collaborate and create social impact. And that's where we have our greatest success. So how we work with businesses can take many forms, but ultimately we set out to inspire, engage and challenge leaders to take practical action to mobilise their collective strength, so all those businesses together as a force for good in society. And I just want to touch a little on how we demonstrate social value, community investment and social impact, and just give one example of social impact. So we create social value with our businesses through volunteers, primarily their employees volunteering to do things like job coaching, offering their skills pro bono to community organisations, so we match those skills to demonstrate social value. For community investment, some of our businesses have donated significant amounts of money that we're then free to use as grants into communities to help towards a just transition. And then in terms of social impact, we're trying to make that long-term systemic change that I think a business can create for the benefit of society or to address a social issue. So some of our campaigns, for example, Race at Work, have been going for 30 years. And whilst there's still a huge amount of work to do, they are creating that sort of long-term systemic change. A more recent campaign has been around inclusive supply chains. And then we have a number of programmes that we implement across the UK. But I'm going to focus briefly on our PLACE programme. It shows the one way that we create social impact with those member businesses. It's generously supported by one of our members, Aviva, and we need those partnerships to deliver at scale, and they're often from businesses that really understand the value of having healthy, vibrant communities, and that is embedded into their business model. We've been doing place-based interventions for the last 4 decades, and over the next decade, we want to be doing that in 50 places across the UK and bringing all of that business support and the skills that businesses have into some of UK's most deep-rooted issues in those areas that are experiencing deep poverty. And I guess success in those areas is about restoring pride, energy and hope, impacting people's lives and creating a fairer, more successful UK. We've got a tried and tested model. We bring all of those movers and shakers together with credible leadership and put sustained resource on the ground, combined with mentoring from the centre. We get quick wins to engage the community and sort of build trust, but at the same time work with the private sector, the public sector and community organisations to create a vision for that area for the future and an agenda for action. And working together, we've had some significant impact. So I'll give the one example of Blackpool. We've been in Blackpool for 8 years alongside partners in the private, public and community sort of sector. And over those 8 years, because of the work that we've been convening, there's been over £1 billion of investment from both the public and private sector into that area, you know, making real change, and has created some significant learnings about certain social issues like poor housing, where we're actually helping to sort of change, you know, the agenda and change policy on how some of those issues are approached. I'll stop there. I think there's lots more I could share, but just to give an example of some of the works that we are doing with the private sector, and very conscious, given the other contributions on this call, that we work with a lot of large, you know, profit-making organisations. But I think to Timothy's point earlier, you know, that there's lots of social impact that businesses can have. Our job is actually pushing businesses to do more and have positive social impact. So thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Sue. And as I said, that's a lot of information, I think, collectively for us all to digest in terms of different perspectives. But I think it's just so valuable to have those different perspectives, I think, as well, just to really find our shared values. And I always keep coming back to this phrase about shared values. So there's nothing in the chat at the moment, but as I said, please do post in the chat at any point, any questions or comments. Does anybody want to put their hand up to ask the first question? Feel free. I probably should do a plug for Bisocial Scotland as well before I forget, which has the Bisocial Scotland pledge, which is about private sector businesses and public sector agencies spending with social enterprises effectively as well, and pledging to do that. So please do look up Bisocial Scotland and the pledge at your leisure, and we'll post a link in the chat as well. So Lucinda, do you want to come in with the first question?
Hi, thanks everybody for all those fascinating contributions. My question is sort of sparked by what you said, Eleonora. I don't want to be cynical, and obviously I agree with what you said in principle, that a purpose-led business is a good thing. But if you look around at all of the businesses, I actually can't think of any at all that don't tell me that they have the community at their heart and they're led by their principles. Like, it's just such a complete cliche of any business whatsoever now. So I'm a bit worried about the kind of, not particularly in your work, Eleonora, but just sort of globally, I'm a bit worried about us thinking that we're getting behind businesses saying that they have ethics and purpose, because they're definitely already saying it, and how we can just be a bit more concrete about what they actually do. And I guess I'm worried about greenwash is what I'm saying. And I would obviously agree with Louise, because we're colleagues, about the value of actual democracy in a business. And like you were saying, Sue, about working with profit-making organizations, like, great, businesses make profit, totally, 100% behind that. But the question is, what do you do with the profit? Who benefits from the profit? How it's distributed? What proportion the workers get? And I think that's a thing. And just one more point, I'm not convinced that the B Corp movement answers that. It seems to me that the standards are quite low, and the certification process is also about paying for it for rather low standards, is my opinion.
Yeah, Eleonora, if you want to come into that point first, yeah.
So I think so. Probably I didn't say what I actually do. So I, in my actual role, I deliver a program that is called Peerworks, and you can see the logo on my screen. And Peerworks is a program delivered by Prosper with the support of Scottish government to support micro, small, medium-sized businesses, social enterprise, charity, public sector organization to work smarter. So in a way to increase productivity without mentioning the word productivity. And in my work, I work with many businesses across Scotland, because what we do is organizing peer-to-peer led events across Scotland that national and international research mention as one of the best way to support small businesses to increase their productivity. And I have to say that I came across to many businesses that are making a difference to their employees, supporting their employees. They're making a difference in the environment. They are really committed to preserve the planet, but also they are making a difference in the community. And actually, I was just having a quick look at the Sunday Times top 100 businesses in the UK, and the most successful 3 businesses, they have a purpose at the heart. That could be sustainability, that could be people well-being. So that is quite interesting. And regarding B Corps, I can understand that, of course. Probably I don't know whether Tim want to add something, but what I know is that B Lab increased the righteousness to their standard recently, because of course there have been some controversial and some discussion around greenwashing or people washing. So I don't think it's difficult to get it perfect, but I definitely see that there are many businesses trying to do better. And when we talk about purpose, purpose is a journey. Some people incept in purpose, some people start their business with purpose, but definitely is not one size fit all, and is a learning journey.
And I know Prosper are quite good at actually platforming social enterprises as well. I've been to a number of your events where you've had Changework speaking in the WISE group as well, so it was always good to see that as well. Tim or any of our other speakers, do you want to come in on any of those points raised so far?
Lucinda, yeah, I think firstly, I'm not a part of the B Corp community per se. So Scotland Can Be is very deliberately it's sort of in recognition of what everyone's saying here, which is great. So what the world probably doesn't need is another certification process. So what can we do that's looking a little bit more deeply with a bit more vulnerability actually around sort of what lies beneath the motivation for any organization to want to be a B Corp? Like why would an organization want to greenwash? Is it because they want to mislead, or is it at some level some recognition that actually we kind of know we could be doing better? And so what I'm interested in, and part of what my point that I wanted to share today was, is around this recognition of, okay, we're creating social impact, but how willing are we to look at what that might be? So whether it's positive or whether it's negative. And I think I would echo what Eleonora's just said. I think no solution necessarily speaks to every single organization. Like I don't think every organization wants to be a co-op, for example, but there's no doubt that being a co-op is awesome for those for whom it works. And I think similarly, I don't think B Corp's for everybody, but really we need to be looking at we need to be looking together at all of the different ways into this stuff, mindful of all of the traps, and greenwashing is a thing. There's absolutely no doubt. I will just say, emphasizing Eleonora's point there, that B Lab have been going through a multi-year consultation process to upgrade their standards, which they've just launched and are just coming into operation. So I actually think you would be finding a lot of resonance. If somebody from B Lab were on the call, I think they would probably be nodding, going like, yep, we've been looking into this. So loads to say, but I know there's lots of voices, so I'll stop there.
Great, thanks. There's a quick poll just popped up on people's screens, which you should be able to see. So if you just fill that in at some point in the webinar, it just gives us good feedback about the webinar so we can improve them in future. It should just take a few seconds as well. Any of our other speakers want to come back on any of those points raised so far before we move on to the next question?
So I think, Duncan, just briefly, I would say that the consumers and employers are sort of forcing businesses to change as well. We can definitely see that. And I think some of our businesses that have launched innovative approaches to things with us and thinking about the work that Aviva are doing with us in places, they've seen a significant improvement in employee engagement as a result. So that's sort of helping them to make even more decisions in that direction in the future too. But also, I think, you know, the shift of consumers and you could different thing polls say different things, but I think there is definitely a shift in people being more thoughtful about how they spend their money. We're seeing that movement slowly growing, and that is influencing businesses as well. So ultimately, how people spend their money, where they choose to work, is also helping businesses maybe move a little quicker on that journey than they might have otherwise.
Great. Any of our other speakers want to come back on these points before we've got a couple of hands up as well? Before we move on, we can come back to this as well, obviously. Okay, so Tor, do you want to come in with your question?
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. My name's Tor Justad. I'm based up in the Highlands, and I provide advice to a number of social enterprises through Plunkett, and I'm also a member with Louise of Cooperate Scotland LLP. Being my generation, I have the advantage of being able to look back a long way in Scotland, and my original involvement was through the Coholman or Community Co-op scheme, which actually originated in the Gaeltacht Irish-speaking part of Ireland, the west coast of Ireland, brought over to Scotland as an idea. And the community co-ops were community-led businesses. Many of them still survive in the islands and on the mainland of Scotland in the Highlands. So, you know, since then we've had so many changes of names. You know, we're now ending up with democratic and inclusive businesses. And it was a point that Michael made, you know, about some of these old terms. I think he described community business as an old term, which was interesting. But I wonder if anything has actually changed. And my point is that all of these initiatives, and I assume this applies to the private sector also, actually start with groups of people getting together or individuals getting together. And we tend to forget that there's a whole process that starts before we can even think about whether to choose a co-op or a B Corp or whatever other model you want to choose. So I would just like to make the point that community development, as we used to call it, and I think is still called, is at the core of all of these types of businesses. And unless you can have the skills and people have the skills to work with groups of people for a common goal, then I don't think any of these businesses will develop. So it's a plea, I suppose, to make sure that in any reports, any policies that we make, that community development is the starting point and at the heart of all of these models. That was just the point I wanted to make, and any comments from speakers would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point actually as well. I think it's worth talking about the local community. What do local communities need? And let's start there, kind of thing. I think that's a really good point actually. Any of our speakers want to come back on that particular point?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Go for it, yeah.
I worked with Alan Kay back in the day, Tor, and I know about these that these different movements. I've written on them along with my colleague Gillian, my former colleague Gillian Murray at the Unicenter of Social Business and Health. We've done a lot of work there tracing the development of the modern social enterprise movement. But effectively, I mean, there are still people around who have used all of these terms basically as they're using them, and then suddenly they decide, you know what, there's money actually in using the term social enterprise. Oh, there's money in using the term X, Y, or Z. But you're right. I remember doing my PhD, and I was speaking to someone who said, "Listen, we've been doing community development in this same building for 30 years, you know, and yeah, today we're using assets-based community development, but effectively it's all the same thing." The trouble is, of course, is that that's all well and good, but it kind of excludes the folks who are well-meaning individual social. I need to be very careful with my terminology. Kim will laugh here. I see her on the screen. I need to be very careful. The well-meaning individuals who are, you know, classify themselves as social entrepreneurs and who are doing. Some of them are doing fantastic stuff. You know, in fact, I'm sure all of them are doing wonderful stuff. You know, and nobody's saying they don't have value and they don't make value and don't create social value. But there has to be room. This is why this is such a large and inclusive tent. And Lucinda, you're right about the term IDBMs. It wasn't me. I warned them. I said, no, I said, this is daft. Don't create a new acronym. It's just what we're talking about is a social economy, basically. If we want to call it social and solidarity economy, then fine. The trouble is these words as well put people off, and we don't want to be part of the social economy. You know, we're something else. We're something new. We're something, etc., etc. But no, the terminology is important up to a point. But I think the point was that really what we want to do is create some kind of movement, and for better or for worse, that's the acronym we've got at the moment. So sorry, Lucinda.
I think that's a good point. I listened, even made that point in the chat as well about the IDBM phrase. We're very, very aware of jargon and kind of, you know, all these policy terms, and we were a bit like, oh, another phrase for us to learn as well. So we didn't come up with it, just to, you know, defense there as well. But we are very aware of that, I think, as well. It's about, part of our job is about demystifying a lot of stuff as well and translating it into basically normal language for people. So we are very, very aware of that, I think. Any of our other speakers want to come back on any of those points at all before we move to the next question?
I'm curious.
Tim,
Richard's got his hand up, but I just Duncan, you'll remember back in the day when we were doing a piece of work together where I was really fixated on this idea of social enterprise being a thing, particularly in Scotland, but then I was sort of sitting with this this mentality of, well, does that mean that everything else is an anti-social enterprise? And I feel like it can't be. It can't be. So I don't think we're there yet, but I kind of feel like the trajectory, the direction of travel, if we're attuned to it and if we're on board with it, is to recognize that, listen, ultimately we actually all do want the same thing. As human beings sharing a planet, we actually do value the same things. We talk about shared values. And then within these acronyms and these kind of these little kingdoms and these little, we sort of fall into the trap of thinking that we're fighting. We fall into the trap of thinking that we want different things. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know that any organization would say, yeah, we are proudly an anti-social enterprise. It doesn't exist. It's nonsense. So I say that in a hopeful way. I say that in a kind of like, it's going to be okay. And you can quote me on that.
No, that's all good. Again, it's part of the debate, part of the conversation. Absolutely, I think to talk about all these things, it's really important. We can come back to that. I mean, we're coming towards the end of the time just now, but if everyone's happy, we can run over by 5 minutes or so. I think our speakers are maybe okay with that as well, hopefully. So, Richard, do you want to come in with the next question? You just had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm Richard McCready. I think I'm work for the Co-op Party, but I'm also a director of a couple of cooperatives. I just wanted to, I mean, Louise mentioned the UK government's sort of ambition to double the size of the co-op sector, and Michael kind of mentioned, you know, that maybe that sort of ambition, you know, set a kind of target figure might not be the way that the co-op sector and other bits of the IDBM sector, if that's which I think we shouldn't call it, develop. But I mean, I suppose my question is it not better to have government, you know, and I think Scottish government is not a million miles away from this either. Is it not better to have a government that's sort of saying that there should be growth in these sectors, which presumably leads to them dealing with some of the things that stop growth in these sectors, which often come back to them, not always, but often do. Or, you know, and how does that link with, you know, Michael's point, which I think is absolutely correct, that as well, and slightly contradictory to what I'm saying, that, you know, our sector develops from people getting together and recognizing the need, and therefore trying to create an organization that meets that need. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's an important point to supposed to state that the existing organizations need the support to stay and to kind of stay around and be supported and be developed, I think, as well. I think it's a really important point. But I think that the thing about targets as well, I think, is quite important as well, because if we don't have targets, then who's held to account for growth? I think it's an important point. I think they're both important points. I don't know if Michael, I feel like you want to say something on that.
Richard, you make great points. What we need to understand, though, is that the community, sorry, the cooperative movement is gigantic. Okay, it's employs 10% of the world's working age population in the world, and if it was a country, the cooperative sector would be larger than France and just below Germany in the size of its of GVA per year. So it's gigantic, and it's actually Scotland and the UK which are the outliers when it comes to this. So the question is not necessarily but perhaps we should be doubling but perhaps we need to look at why has the cooperative movement declined significantly, because it's always been there. Saying that, with some of the largest co-ops in the world in the UK, the co-op group is gigantic as well. So it's about re-engaging, I suppose, with a model which is yes, it was created in Scotland, as Louise says. I mean, the Fenwick Weavers Society, the Fenwick Weavers co-op is the oldest documented co-op in the world. So I genuinely think there are things that we can do that can unlock the potential. I think what we're saying is that the co-op movement has undoubted potential. You would think that a Labour and cooperative party, and many of the MPs in Parliament now are Labour and cooperative members, that they would have this at their heart, at their core. Yeah, Fenwick Weavers, 1761. It's so, I'm all with you, Richard. Whether we can or whether we do, create or have a target of doubling it, great, fantastic, because we're going to need to have an infrastructure that supports that. That we're going to have a fair amount of additional investment, fair amount of all the things that I mentioned, really, in order to make that happen. Then great, if we don't reach a target, then at least people will know more about the co-op movement and know more about its potential, etc., etc. So, yeah.
Any of our other speakers want to come back on any of those points just raised at all? There was another point in the chat actually around community wealth building. I don't want to open up that. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole, I think, but obviously there's community wealth building legislation at the moment, which is very much about, there's different pillars to community wealth building, and that's making economic development at a local level statutory for the first time, and that's focused on growing the number of social enterprises and other IDBMs, for want of a better phrase, land reform, asset ownership, local asset ownership, these kind of issues it's been focused on as well. So I don't know if anybody's got any particular thoughts on the community wealth building aspect. Obviously we are all part of that process. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole if you don't want to. It might be a bit of a curveball there. Okay, so we're kind of at the end of time now. So what I would say is, with a final thought, I did want to make this a bit of a shared values kind of session, but it's great that it's gone in various directions, I think, as well, in terms of the debate, because that's what it's about. It's about having this debate, having this discussion, and raising points which are maybe uncomfortable as well. I think that's really, really important. But I do want to kind of end on that kind of shared values note and kind of think about, in terms of the problems we're facing as a society, we kind of know the list already, but what do you think businesses of all kinds, social enterprises, cooperatives, private sector businesses, should be doing more on? What should their priorities be? I mean, that could be an obvious question, to be honest, but just get your thoughts from the speakers on that point. Sue, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think speaking up, I think we did a survey recently, actually, and with everything going on in the States, and people going a bit quiet on things like diversity, inclusion, equity, and so there's progress that businesses are making, and there's danger that some might take backward steps now, because just trying to sort of balance risk and things. But I think it's really important that businesses are, I say brave, I don't know if that's the right word, but speak out about these things, and actually aren't sort of going quiet just because it's probably easier not to put your head above the parapet at the moment, just in fear of being questioned or challenged. So that's the thing I'd say, is that businesses need to be brave, share stories, talk about the great things that they're doing if they are truly doing that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's maybe reinvigorate that agenda actually a bit, because there is that kind of backsliding, as you say. That's a really good point, actually. Yeah. Many of our other speakers want to come in, just final thoughts on that kind of what we
Yeah.
should be prioritizing, and any other final thoughts you've got as well, if you want to add in anything else.
I have to say, I can completely echo what Sue's saying. I think in the current climate, I think it's really, really important that businesses advocate and, evoke what they're doing and what good they are doing in communities. I think more often than not, smaller cooperative social enterprise businesses, they're not always terribly good at shouting from the parapets and saying what good they are doing or what they're implementing. But I think it is, in times like these, it is imperative that we do that. And I think all businesses over the next 10, 15, 20 years do have to start looking down the route of net zero and carbon management and those kind of things. Strays away from the kind of social impact, but we all know the impacts of that will soon impact the lower tier of people's salaries, the impoverished people who will be affected the most by hunger and that kind of stuff. So I think that's a really important direction as well.
Absolutely, very, very good point actually. Yeah. Other speakers want to give your final thoughts on those or other points?
Yeah, I think obviously for what I can see with all the research and analysis, it's great for businesses to be obviously, but it's also good for the business to be good because we see that employees wants to work for those businesses. They find it a meaningful work and they want to be part of something bigger, not just going to work and going back home, but knowing that they are contributing to saving the planet for their neighbors, children, family, and making sure that community, people are treated respectfully through fair work, through many other different things. So I think at the moment, and we made the case also for productivity, which is the other big thing that in the UK we keep on talking. So if we use resources better in a smarter way, we can also have better productivity. And another thing that I would like to highlight, and I know that Lucinda brought this out, but it's really important for social enterprises, IDBM businesses, and so on, co-op, to show what they are doing to businesses, because sometimes it's not the businesses don't want to do it, don't know how to do it. And that's the reason why we are saying that purpose is a journey, because some businesses incept in purpose and they adopt purpose. But I would love, even at PeerWorks, to get more co-op and other business models to come along and talk about what they do so that others can learn and use purpose in a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that storytelling is really powerful, isn't it? I think we definitely need to do far more of that. We talk about it all the time, I think. But yeah, the more we can do that, the better, I think. Other last three speakers, if you want to have a final thought. I think was that Tim, Michael, and Louise.
Yeah, apologies. I mentioned before I'm always slow on the uptake on the chat, but I've seen Louise, I've seen your sort of response to something that I said, and I think part of the reason I said it is to show that not all businesses have got it right. And I think when we talk about this being a journey, and I was probably a little bit flippant when I use the word we all, I think the point here is that there is an opportunity to do things better. There is always an opportunity to do things better. And it does really become a process of learning. I really can't point to a perfect business, and I don't know if you can. I don't know of an organization that has got 100% positive impact. I've never encountered one, and anyone on the call, please let me know if they exist. But I think that we have to be open-minded, and we have to be mindful of how difficult it is to run a business. That doesn't excuse bad behavior, but I think that sometimes part of the problem is that we become quite territorial and we become quite judgmental about right and wrong. So I feel like there's something really worth learning about how difficult it is to navigate these conversations respectfully, with a broad mind, learning from our different bodies of work. So I love that this has come up. I'm sorry that it took a little while for me to cotton on. The comment was there and I can see other responses as well. But frankly, I think that's one of the conversations we should be having. I think it kind of echoes what Eleonora has just said around the kinds of organizations that tend to come to groups are, generally speaking, the same kinds of organizations. And so we become very, very siloed. I think that's part of the problem, personally. So I'm actually really glad that this has come up. And by the way, Louise, I'd be very, very happy to continue the conversation. I know we're coming up at time here, but let's stay in touch.
Yeah, and good. It's good to raise all these points. To be honest, I mean, we're happy to have these conversations. Absolutely, I think so. Louise and then Michael, do you want to just make your final points, if that's okay? So, Louise, you're on mute.
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that we kind of open up pathways for businesses who want to be kind of more cooperative and have a more kind of, democratic way of working, and that becomes much more accessible. I mean, kind of what's happened is that has been very inaccessible in Scotland for the last kind of 18 or so years. And so I think this sort of forum is really good. But just to echo one of my last comments, I think we must not forget that one of the reasons that we're in the catastrophic climate crisis is because of the structures that are in place. And those come from, as I think I said, basically the structural change, it starts right here. And if you can't do it in your own business, you can't extend trust, you can't work democratically, you're not prepared to educate people to be able to engage kind of more in those processes, then you're basically moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic, I think, in terms of the global economy and the climate crisis. So I do actually really personally see co-ops and employee-owned companies as well that kind of operate in the same way as the genuine way of addressing that, because it's proposing a different way of working and a different, and I would love to, the idea that people can somehow sort of suddenly or not suddenly, gradually even become more open to different ways of doing things. But I think the reality is, and I know it from my own working life as a TV producer, some people just are not interested. Really, they're not. So, we've got to really kind of build a different world and kind of move out the way, but recognize that we're just going to, hit some walls sometimes. And there are some people simply not going to be interested, not interested. So, that's ending a downer, isn't it, really? Sorry about that, everybody.
I guess just very quickly, so what do you think businesses should be prioritizing in terms of the issues? I mean, we talked about equalities, diversity, inclusion, for example, and kind of climate change. Is there anything else you think we should be all prioritizing, I guess, all of our types of businesses?
I think it's just really looking at how you work within your own business, because that will also inform the way you look at the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
If you can do it at home, then you're going to do it outside. It's exactly, what we've heard about, we heard from Rob as well, that you don't need to go through a sort of checklist of stuff, because that culture of care and trust and inclusion and sort of, care for the wider community is just part of your culture as a business. And it starts there and then it ripples out the way.
That's a very good point.
That's what I would say.
And Michael, do you want to tell just the last word?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I suppose and Louise has hit the nail on the head around the real problem here is around the commodification really of labour, land and people, and labour, land and money, I should say. And so in other words, business can and is part of the problem because of the commodification of things that shouldn't actually be treated as commodities. I could talk about this at length, but I won't. But there are some of the most profitable and some of the most damaging companies on earth, frankly, are, things like the financial services industry, things like the arms industry, things like the petrochemical industries. They're not interested in becoming B Corps. They're not, they're not, they probably don't want to know the amount of damage they're causing to the world, but they will continue to do so until they're told to stop. So in terms of what we can do, and not necessarily as a trade, well, we can all trade as as well as possible, as nicely as possible, as profitably, and support our communities as much as we can. But often the best thing we can do is lobby government and stand for, and yes, it's all down to democracy and making sure democracy works. But as soon as you have a democracy that's paid for lobbyists who really actually want to push the whole thing down onto the problem being, well, it's all about consumers and consumer must have the choice and all that kind of stuff. It's not about consumers at all. It's about addressing things far upstream, making sure that companies are held to account for what they do, to the damage they're causing to the people and the planet. So sorry to leave it in such a
That's all good.
catastrophic.
Again, no, it's all good. I think it's a good point as well about democracy as well. There's the democracy matters conversations happening at a policy level as well. I think there's a lot of good potential there actually as well about improving democracy and democratic processes, and basically allowing more ordinary people like us and other people just to actually have a say in those decision making processes. I think it's really important. That's a discussion for another day, I'm sure. But I think that's a really valuable discussion we've had, and again, I really value the different perspectives there as well. I think that's what it's all about. Is about having this debate, having this discussion, bringing out these issues. I think it's really essential to have this. And again, as I say at every webinar, this isn't the end of the discussion, it's the beginning. We have run over a bit, but I think that's been really valuable to have that extra time. So thanks to our speakers, and thanks to our speakers as well for coming along today. Again, really appreciate that. I really appreciate your time, and everybody else has come along. And do book a place at our final webinar in the series. I think it is next week. Almost forgotten what it is. I think it's on universal basic income and minimum income guarantee. I think that's our final one next week. So please do book a free place at that, and do promote it as well. That would be really appreciated. So just a final thanks to everybody. Get in touch with myself and Andy with any policy issues around this webinar, or indeed around any of other policy issues you'd like to chat to us about. That's what we're here for. And have a great day.